Welcome to the 23rd episode of the Most Serious Podcast. In today's episode, I talk to Mr. Jay Smith, who is a forensic analyst. He's a cybersecurity expert. He's also a private investigator. In this episode, we talk about cyberspace. We talk about your online privacy. Are you really safe on the internet? And if you are safe, how much safe you are and how much at risk you are. We also discuss what are some common cybersecurity threats that people are not aware of. And when they do get aware of them, how can they protect themselves against it? We also talk about the psychology behind a cybercrime attack from the attacker's point of view and also the victim's point of view. How can you navigate your feelings and your emotions if you ever encounter such situations? Mr. J. Smith also talks about some common myths and things that people are not aware about the cyberspace. And if they were able to take care of these things, they would have a rather safer and a secure online experience. We also talk about anonymity on the internet. Are the people who think that they're anonymous, they hide behind a fake social media account, are they really that safe and are they really that anonymous? If you want to learn about online privacy, you want to learn about the fundamental principles that are important for you to keep yourself and your family and your friends safe from the risks of data breach or becoming a victim from a cybercrime attack, then do listen to this episode. I hope you like the conversation today. Let's get into the episode now. Mr. Jay Smith, finally, it's great to have you on the Most Serious Podcast. I was excited to talk to you. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Now, there are a lot of questions when we thought about having you on the podcast and when we had a chat before recording this. So I don't know if I classify as a nerd, but I had a lot of questions that are related to the cybersecurity space, related to computers. I am also studying information technology as my major in my undergrad. So we are going to talk about a lot of computers, and I believe you're the right person for the job.
I hope so.
Now, the first thing that comes to my mind is what got you into this space? The first idea that came along. Okay, I want to work with some computers. I want to work with cybersecurity maybe. So what was the first step that led you here?
Well, as a child, after I saw War Games, a very old movie, one of the first hacking movies out there, I went home and tried to recreate what he was doing on my Commodore 64. Okay. And ever since then, I've just been very computer capable and love working with them and teaching them. I was a full stack web developer and scripter about 10 years ago. Okay. And I discovered a small vulnerability. And as I kept on learning more and more, I got very interested in cybersecurity and forensics. That's kind of how I stuck with it.
So at what age did you start the first recreation of game that you tried? So how old were you then?
Oh, wow. Probably 8.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Gosh, I'm not sure when that movie came out. Maybe 83. So maybe I was 10.
Yeah. So do you think we've already seen a massive change in technology from the time that you were trying to maybe build those games, and now you see a lot can happen with maybe a smartphone or let's say just a usual laptop. So you've seen the transition. How do you feel about the transition? Do you think it has been overwhelming for someone like you who was associated with technology very early on?
I think it lends itself to getting far too involved with it. If you don't control that and also live your life, it's easy to let it take over everything. And that's a conscious thing you have to keep in front. And it's like anything else, you becoming way too focused on one thing is just not healthy.
I also was wondering that since at the time when you were a kid and the vibe with computers and the vibe with software, let's say, was very different. There were not as many apps there weren't apps at all. There were no mobile phones and everything. So now that you see the current age, you see today's 8-year-olds, they're maybe programming some websites at all by themselves, and they're all obviously hooked on various apps. So what does Jay Smith as a teenager, when he was 8-year-old and now at a current 8-year-old, he see the striking differences between them through the lens of technology?
Oh yeah. So there's good and bad. And what I try to keep in front, it's easy to think everything's bad. Our privacy is gone. There's breaches every day, the T-Mobile breach. But the truth is we have all of the knowledge in the world in our hands right now. Any piece of art, any piece of music, any poetry, any story ever told, you can get to right now. And when I was a child, you had to go to your grandmother's house and open an encyclopedia and read a small paragraph on it. Yeah.
So do you miss that? Do you think you were better off as a teenager in 83 or 85, or would you have been better off as a teenager in today's world?
That's hard to say. I don't try to dwell on that. I think it's just different. We did a lot more real things. We played outside a lot more, and we went camping, and we went on road trips, and we did things that were a little more real world centered than now. But now we're also exposed to a whole lot more culture and a lot more viewpoints than we were then. Then you got all of your opinions and all of your information from the people around you or the news. Now it's the entire world.
And also, like, you're in almost always connected to the entire world, and it's right at your disposal. You just open an app and maybe you can reach out to millions of people right away. So I think that's pretty crazy. So how do you think about it personally? Because people back then obviously were isolated. By isolated, I mean, like, you lived in a certain environment, and that encompassed all of your personality, all of your friends. So you were limited to that area or probably that geographical location, let's say. And now it's not as much as about the geographical location, but about how are you in the internet world also, because, it's like the cyberspace is an actual space now. So do you think the struggles have increased, or maybe it's all balancing out itself? Do we have to be conscious about most of our actions on the cyberspace? So how do you go about introducing someone to this cyberspace? Let's say a young kid walks up to you and asks, okay, I'm new to this. Let's say the chances of this happening are less, but let's say you're introducing a new kid to internet. So what would the ideal roadmap be?
Being that I work in forensics and am a private investigator, I'm always far more cautious on the privacy side. So anybody I'm introducing, I don't want to try and scare anyone off or give them a negative view of the internet, because, as I said, it's everything in the world, all the knowledge in the world in your hands. But with that comes, it's 20-year or 30-year-old technology for most of us. We're still learning our way through it. So I tend to skew people far more towards the privacy side and being very cautious with what they do, particularly with their personal information. Sharing everything on Instagram, TikTok, or any of those, it's open to the world. So there are still humans who will do bad things with that information.
Jay, have you ever personally encountered a situation wherein you were a part of, or you were being dealt with a cyber crime situation or something that would you call a privacy breach?
Yes. As a private investigator and a digital forensic analyst, that's primarily what I deal with. I generally deal more on an individual basis with just people or families dealing with harassment, stalking, and bullying using digital means. But I had my identity stolen back in my 20s before the internet was even a thing. Yeah, that's because when I was in the Army, when we wrote a letter to somebody, we had to write our social security number on the envelope. So that was part of our return address, was our social security number.
That's crazy. And it's hard to believe, because before that time, I don't know if people worried about this stuff, even identity theft, and like it must have been present, but the risk that is associated with it right now, it's a lot more than the time you're talking about.
Yes, it's huge. But if people take a couple of steps that don't really take a whole lot of effort, and I'm speaking specifically to the United States, because I don't know how these things work in other countries, but freezing your credit so that nobody can open a line of credit in your name using a password manager so you don't remember all your passwords, because if you remember all your passwords, they're probably all the same.
Yeah.
Things like that, and not oversharing. I work with the Girl Scouts, which is a social organization here in the United States, and what they share online is a big part of what we talk about. Anything that can identify where you are or what you do, or give somebody enough information so that they can try and scam you, are things that I really try to get people away from.
You mentioned like a really interesting point that when you deal with individual, let's say people and families that often encounter cyberbullying or cases of cybercrime. So I wanted to talk to you about the psychology behind the cyberbullying from the, let's say, the victim's end also, but also the one who's, let's say, conducting this whole act. If a person has executed ransomware on your device, or has sent you maybe some links that are now threatening you, that they contain your personal information and all of that stuff. So first want to talk about the psychology, and how do you feel about the person who's behind all this, who's doing this stuff, and also the victim. So can you maybe walk me through that?
Yeah. So as far as the attacker, in most cases, it's not targeted. It's a commodity. So it's a scammer who purchases a kit from an online forum or gets it for free, which means they probably got malware in it too on their system. And then they just send it out to as many people as they can in the hopes that they will get just enough to make some money. I have dealt with targeted situations where an ex-spouse or somebody the person knows puts something on their phone to track them or to record what they're saying. Really, those types of attacks are nothing new. It's just the technology has enabled a new way to do it. Jealous ex relationship partners following people around and doing things bad to them and calling them and hanging up. Those things have been around for a long time. It's just technology has enabled some anonymity. It enables people to hide behind fake personas, and it empowers them to do things that they normally wouldn't do if they were out in the open.
Yeah.
One of the striking aspects of victims of these kind of things is just the fear and the anger and the need for retribution. Those are things that we really work hard to avoid, because the situation doesn't improve by engagement or attacking back. It never does. And having dealt with bullies myself as a child, I know that's easy to say, just ignore them kind of thing.
Yeah.
That generally doesn't sit very well with somebody who's being victimized. But in truth, by fighting back or by trying to do aggressive things back, you don't put yourself in a good position if it goes to a court. Yeah. So I generally just advise record everything. There's a great app out there called Hunchly Mobile. It's free, and it allows you to save all your screenshots, all your emails, and then email them directly to a lawyer or an investigator or a law enforcement, and it hashes them and everything. And having all of that information from the very get-go allows you a lot more legitimacy in court to get legal help to put a stop to harassment.
That makes sense. Do you think the way you talk about the psychology behind both of these parties, do you think as a normal person, as a person who's just going about their life and they someday stumble upon this thought of, am I safe online? Are my actions not breaching my privacy or something? So how fearful or how scared should a person be while spending their time in this cyberspace? Because it is taking a lot of portion of our lives. And but how much of that fear and scared element maybe should be present in any given individual's life?
Enough to protect yourself, but not enough to not live your life. So I would liken it to camping out in the forest. You need to be aware of the animals that are around you and the dangers that are around you, but not so much to the point where you hide away from it and don't experience it.
Exactly.
There are some fundamental things you can do to make sure that you're safe online, or as safe as possible. And I liken it to there's a common saying or a common kind of joke meme where, two campers are running away from a bear down a hill.
Okay.
And one camper turns to the other and says, "How are we going to outrun this bear?"
Yeah.
And the other camper says, "I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you." The same is true when it comes. Yeah, the same is true when it comes to getting hacked.
Yeah.
These attacks are fired at everybody. So you don't have to lock down your entire digital life and be 100% safe and always look for the next thing. You have to be safer than the majority of other people. And that's not very hard to do because the majority of people aren't safe at all online.
Why do you say that? Why do you believe that majority of the people are not safe online? Do you see this at scale because of the profession you're in, or were you this educated about it at an age maybe when you were not working as a, let's say, forensic analyst or someone who is protecting people in the cyberspace?
No, it's certainly something that's top of mind for me because of what I do for a living. It's not something, and that's what we've done as the internet and the information age has proliferated, is we made it so easy to start a new app, to sign up for a new app, to start enjoying a game, to play, to share, without putting a whole lot of effort into protecting it.
Yeah.
We want more and more users for our app when we build it. We want more and more people in our database, because the more information we have, the more we can sell it or we can do things with it to make more money. But we just haven't made it important enough. Now, GDPR, CCPA, some of the other privacy regulations have started to make it important enough to corporations to protect us or to help us protect ourselves, but we're not there yet.
This obviously brings us to the education that is associated with, let's say, surfing on the internet, or how aware you are about privacy. And this is something that is not being addressed at a larger scale. Let's say people have to stumble upon this thought of, am I safe online? To then maybe find resources to know, okay, I have to do this, I have to do this. So this makes me sure of some parts of my online browsing are safe. So how do you feel about this situation? Like, why are we not educating people enough about cybersecurity?
It's one of those things where it hasn't become important enough. It doesn't make money. It doesn't generate revenue. It actually impacts revenue in a lot of cases. So companies, they may, they'll say it's important, but it's not as important. And it's going to take, and I mean, we kind of thought in this industry with the Home Depot breach and then the Target breach and then the Equifax breach, like, okay, this is the one. This is really going to get people's attention. It didn't. And sure, T-Mobile just had a breach with over 100 million customer records with credit cards and social numbers. So that was they just announced last night that they verified it, but it's bad. So we have to figure out a way to make it important. And whether that's through regulation or somehow monetizing it, I'm not really sure how you do it.
I think, the math of it can be figured out, but I think the intention behind it should be to make at least people aware about the space that they're in. At least let them know that what are they getting themselves into. So that would serve for also, like, you must deal with teenagers and you must deal with young people a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So
I do a lot of talking in schools.
So what's the common thing that you find, like, amongst the people that you help after, let's say, a cyber breach or something? Or what's the common thing in teenagers that you find this is something that if you all addressed fundamentally, this could help you a lot while your online experience?
A few of the major, there's a pecking order, and there's a few things at the very top that make it that have a big impact. And then of course
Okay.
you can spend years making yourself more and more private with little tweaks. But honestly, it's stay off of public Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Most cell phone plans now have unlimited data. There's really no reason to get on Starbucks Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
If you do get on public Wi-Fi, don't do anything sensitive. Don't get on your bank account. Don't get on your credit card app or anything like that. And then, use a password manager. That's first and foremost what I really try to drive home to people is reusing simple passwords is the easiest way. That's how when, a celebrity, we hear that their Instagram was hacked. Well, nobody sat at a keyboard and banged away for 20 hours to hack in. They figured out their password in most cases. And it's because, say T-Mobile with this brand new breach, 100 million passwords are out there now.
Yeah.
How many of those people reuse those passwords on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, their bank account, their credit card? So now what criminals are going to do is they're going to spray those passwords on everything they can to see what else they can get into.
Right.
And that's why reusing passwords, that's the one thing I really preach. I know my family and friends hate hearing about it because I talk about it all the time. But really, that's the one thing. So, if you're in a T-Mobile breach, and I'm going to be a part of it, I was a T-Mobile customer. They're going to have one password of mine, my T-Mobile password at the time. That will not get them into anything else of mine. So that's why it's key to use password management software. So you don't even know all your passwords because they're very long and very complex. Yeah. And they're randomly generated.
People are often, sorry, please continue.
No, and to get back to your original point, when it comes to teenagers and adults, when I'm first speaking to them, there seems to be a lot of resignation to, well, this is just the way the world works. My home address, my phone number, all my information is just all over the internet. And that's really, I don't believe that's something we have to accept. Yes, we want to live and work on the internet. We have to in order to survive and thrive because that's the way the world works now. Yeah. But we don't have to have our personal information available for anyone who wants to see it. And regulation hasn't caught up yet. There are upwards of 200 data broker websites that show your personal information, calling it from public records. Yeah, they're all over the place. And my company helps clear those things off. But when we first talk to somebody, a lot of times they're just resigned to, well, it is what it is. I'm all over the internet. They know my social, so big deal. And honestly, again, it goes back to that bear analogy. It is a big deal if there's 500 of us and only 10 of us are secure, because the other 490 are going to be the ones that have to deal with something.
I think that's a very simple analogy, and I believe people would be able to remember it along the way in their cyberspace journey, because you don't have to go out of your way to deal with the people who are threatening you or who are the attackers. We have guys like Jay Smith to take care of them. But what you can do to make their job easier is to maybe make some basic privacy education and make yourselves aware, make yourselves at minimal risk that you can. Now, I think what I also wanted to talk to you about was during the cases that you encounter with cyber crimes or cyberbullying or let's say other attacks that go on people. So during that act, people are often, as you mentioned, they're angry, they want retribution, or sometimes they're so scared that they don't want to talk about it to people. So exactly, let's say someone stumbles upon this podcast and they maybe in the future encounter some situation in which their data is at risk, or let's say they are being on the wrong end of a ransomware attack. So what are the steps that you would advise them? Like you mentioned, record everything and all, but psychologically also, like what's something that would get them over that fear and also that isolation that they will do? Because, okay, now my information is everywhere. Now, how do I tell about my friends or maybe contact some help? So how do you deal with those cases?
So in the majority of cases, when it comes to the psychology of a scam or an attack, the major thing to remember is to remain calm. Your life in these cases is not being threatened. And scammers who will call you, and this is one of the major things that will happen out of a breach like T-Mobile, is scammers who have a lot more personal information about people will begin contacting them and try to trick them. They'll say, hey, I'm in your bank account right now. I'm with the security center. Someone is trying to steal money. We need to move it to another account.
Okay.
The majority of companies are not going to call you. And even if they do, every one of them will understand if you say, you know what, I'm going to hang up and I'm going to call the company directly and I will speak to the security department. Anybody you're talking to that discourages you from doing that is a scammer. Because any company that deals with anything financially of yours, it absolutely will support you hanging up and calling back to the company line.
Yeah.
But scammers and hackers rely on our psychology, on our fear, and they try to play on that sense of urgency. They'll send you an email that says, I have a video of you at your computer doing something that your family wouldn't want to see, and that gets whether or not we think it's true, it just gets our fight or flight response going. So really, the key is to remember is don't panic. Don't panic, and in most cases, don't engage. Don't engage with the criminals directly.
Okay.
Save the evidence, contact law enforcement, and report it to the platform. And that's one of the major steps I tell people dealing with harassment or stalking, because a lot of times it's from anonymous accounts or fake accounts. Report it to the platform, and they'll take those accounts down. If someone continues creating new accounts, eventually the platform is going to block their IP address and block them from creating any accounts. So that's yes, it's easy to say that because I know in this situation, the anger and the fear, particularly if it's your child dealing with this, what I try to get people to is the best result you're going to get is by doing it in a calm and measured manner and not trying to fight fire with fire. Because eventually, if you do uncover who's doing it, it needs to go to court. If you're doing illegal activities trying to get back at the person, it's gonna end up in a bad result.
Right. I think also the point you mentioned is don't act in that state of panic, because what they do is they put a time frame on you. Maybe they'll ask you to, let's say, perform an act in this time frame only, and you're not thinking about the larger picture here. You're not thinking, okay, let's say if I do engage in this activity now, this could also put me in a position where I have to consistently do these acts that this person is asking. So to be aware of that situation, I think that's really crucial, and that's really important as well during these acts.
Absolutely. That's the foot in the door phenomenon. It's a psychological phenomenon. It's how kids get groomed online for trafficking. Honestly, somebody will befriend them online, will ask them from something very benign, take a picture of your TV or take a picture of your favorite video game, and then they'll escalate, because once you give somebody something, you're much more likely to continue giving them more and more and more. That's just our nature. That's human nature, and they rely on that. And then once they get you to share something that's embarrassing or could get you in trouble, then they start blackmailing you and saying, I'm going to share this with your family if you don't send me more and more and more. So being aware and remaining calm when you're dealing with a situation allows you to step back from that emotional response and be very cautious about what you're doing moving forward. And try to remember, unlike in the real world, in a very tense and scary situation, in most cases, when you're dealing with something online, there's no physical threat. You're not in actual physical danger. And that's what really keep front of mind.
If we are able to remember these things, I think that would pacify people a lot. And I'm sure if someone does end up listening to this and it helps them, it would be amazing. Now, I wanted you to educate me a little bit about the common cyber crimes or acts that happen. I know about a few of them. I know there's one phishing, it's a malware attack, and ransomware and all of that. So how much of them should I be aware of? And maybe if I knew what those terms meant, so I can maybe protect them. So what are the common attacks that you encounter?
So the most common Yeah. So one of the most common is phishing with a PH, and that's sending out emails with malicious attachments or with URLs that if you click on it and go to it, it'll download malware on your computer. It's very important to be aware. We see a lot of them come through that look like they're from PayPal or from iCloud. One of them I've seen a lot recently. It's PayPal, but the L is a capital I, so it looks like PayPal, but not really. And it plays on those psychological ploys where, like, oh, your account's been compromised, or here's your receipt for an app you bought for $199. And a lot of people like, oh no, and they click on it. And they just think, stop and take a breath. Even if somebody were able to buy an app fraudulently using your account, you'll be able to get that money back. But chances are that's fake. And looking at it, a lot of times with phishing emails, you can see misspellings. It doesn't look like correct English or grammar, or in any language, something's not quite right. The pictures don't line up. If PayPal or Apple or another massive internet company is going to send you an email, those pictures are going to line up. They spend a whole lot of money on user experience and user interface. That stuff, if it looks wonky, it probably wasn't made by Apple or PayPal.
Yeah.
So trust your instincts is one of the major things, and people don't think that's a big part of not getting scammed online, because this is all so technical. But really, we still have a great deal of ability to look at something and our brain just says something's not right. Listen to that. You got to listen to that voice. Of course, we have the other scams where a lot of them will call directly to your phone using a VoIP number, so you don't know where they're really calling from. That's the majority of individual scams that happen. And a lot of people end up in these conversations, and they tend to target older people just because they don't get a lot of phone calls, and they grew up in an era when you were speaking with someone, you trusted what they were saying.
Yeah.
People didn't just call up and directly lie to your face, but that's the world we live in now. And that's called vishing because it's voice phishing.
Okay.
There's all kinds of ishings out there. Yeah. And smishing is SMS text.
Okay.
Yeah, we've gone a little crazy with the ishing in this industry.
Do you think also, tell me about this, Jay, what happens with, let's say, an anonymous person? People obviously are taking benefit from this anonymity on social media also, racist abuses or trolling someone and everything that happens. Now, I just wanted to know that how anonymous exactly are these people? Can't they be tracked down?
Yes. In some cases, we can do it through open source intelligence. We can find where they've reused usernames. In most cases, they're pretty cagey about it. But if it crosses our desk, so that means somebody is spending money to put a stop to this. What we will do is we will get with the app provider and we will get a court order to uncover who that user really is. Because at some point they had to use a real IP address, email, or phone number to open an account. And the larger social media platforms are pretty good about figuring or ensuring that the person who's opening the account is a real person. And they are very responsive. So, and people think, oh, they're not, Facebook is not going to answer the phone and tell me who this is. They're not going to answer the phone and tell an individual who it is. But these social media companies are very responsive to court orders.
Okay.
And they do have that information. And that's one thing that I try to stress to teenagers in particular, because they get in the cyberbullying and also with sharing. And they believe that some of these apps like Snapchat disappear. It doesn't disappear. That's just the way the app is designed for our benefit so that for our use, we know that a message disappears. It's still on their server. And when they're provided with a court order that says produce the owner of this information and produce the pictures that were sent, they will do it immediately. Wow. If not in just a few days. So as a legally licensed investigator, generally an attorney who represents a family will contact my company. and we will do some forensics on either their computer or their mobile phone to determine who the username is, what timestamps that stuff came on. We'll gather all the evidence, and I'll encourage them to use Hunchly when I first talk to them, because the sooner you start saving evidence, the better you will be. If you're looking for a court order, you need a preponderance of evidence, or at least as much as possible. And if you can present it in an organized fashion rather than just show up to the court and swipe through a bunch of pictures, you're a lot more likely to get the result you need. So that's why I urge people, let's not start up another account and fight back with them. And that's not going to get us anywhere. That we want to solve this problem. So, getting that information and then going to the court and requesting them to demand that information from the social media company or the telecom. One thing people don't realize is T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, any telecom is also going to share the real phone number behind the fake phone number that's sending harassing messages.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So people think if they download Text Now or some other app that allows you to get these, temporary use phone numbers, in order to send an SMS message, you have to have a real phone number behind it. That's the technology of it.
Right.
The fake phone number is just a mask. But your real phone number behind that fake phone number is still on the server. And if you're harassing somebody using a fake phone number, it's only a matter of a court order going to the telecom carrier to get your real phone number. And if it's gotten to the point where you've harassed somebody to the point where they're spending real money on an attorney and an investigator like myself, it's going to go to court. So that's what I try to stress to teenagers is you're not anonymous. You're temporarily anonymous, but you're not anonymous.
That's very important, and I think it was really awesome the way you put it out, and it's very essential to also not just educate the victims or the people who could be at risk, but also the people who could maybe be the attackers or the perpetrators who are thinking of let's say engaging in some activity out of spite, thinking okay, no one's gonna know, and maybe I can get out of this without any trouble. Now, if the person who was attacked, if they actually get to pursue this, you could be in some real trouble. I think that's absolutely that's what puts let's say a safety net on the people who could be at risk, and they also get this confidence that law and enforcement does actually matter, and these things can be resolved if you just stay calm. You provide the evidence, and we can get through at the end of this.
Yes, there's a lot of frustration with local law enforcement. Because people just presume, well, this is happening. I call the police. They're supposed to fix it. Well, the police are not equipped to deal with every call that regards social media harassment, online harassment, bullying, things like that. That's why it's so important. And I'm not going to sit here as a businessman and say that's why it's important you always call me. No. I wouldn't be able to sleep if I took every case.
Exactly.
That's why it's so important to remain calm and to do things the correct way. And that's save all the evidence, report the abuse to the platform, present the evidence. You can actually go to a court and get your own court order, really. But for simplicity's sake, it's generally easier to hire an attorney to do that for you. But you can, in many U.S. states, there are plenty of law. You can sue somebody for harassment. And if you establish that, hey, these people have been harassing my child for months, here are hundreds and hundreds of messages where they've told them to harm themselves. We've reported to the school. Here's where we reported to the school. We've reported to police, and with dates and all that, you present that to a court. They're not even going to hesitate to send orders of, it's called Duces Tecum. That's the kind of warrant to produce evidence. And they'll send it to all of those carriers, the telecoms, the Twitter, the Instagram. And once you have all that, there really is no need for a court case, because now you've got a preponderance of evidence, and the other person, all they're going to have is denial.
Exactly. And also in the case of it, like when you have all that evidence and the companies they are also trying to give that evidence, because they don't want to end up in a situation where they look bad because something happened at their end. So they must be also willing, get this matter out of our hands and let them deal with the victim or the person who attacked justly. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yep. Yes,
Do you
they're
think,
very
Jay,
responsive to the court order.
yeah. So Jay, like coming to the conclusion of this episode where I learned a lot. Now I want to ask you about this. If a person, let's say one day decides, someday, okay, now I want to erase everything that I ever did on the internet and I never want to leave a footprint here. So like, as we know with the carbon footprint, like, we have changed the world forever. Now, is this same with the internet thing? You can't erase your cyber footprint at all, or can this be done?
To an extent, it can.
Okay.
What the only way to really do it would be to stop using it altogether and then just let the mountain of information that comes out every day bury you in history.
Okay.
Now you can delete Facebook, you can delete Twitter, and after a certain amount of time, they will cleanse you from the system. They don't make it very easy to do, but they will do it. But as far as just every online trace of you, it's difficult to do. And there are investigators out there. Michael Bazell comes to mind in California who do it for very, very rich people.
Okay.
People who need to keep things very, very quiet. I would stress to somebody that that's a rabbit hole that is not worth your energy. You're going to spend a whole lot of your life energy basically just being obsessed with your online footprint. When really, if you would just spend a little bit of energy up front being safe with what you do online, then you won't have the bad consequences of your information. Now, in the case of T-Mobile, we couldn't do anything. Now it's out there and it wasn't our fault. We were using a service. And they will probably be forced to do some sort of credit monitoring, But again, let's go back to the bear, right? There's 100 million people. If you're safer than 99 million of them, you're going to be in a pretty good situation. Not great, but don't reuse passwords, freeze your credit, do the top things that make you not the low-hanging fruit, the easiest to victimize.
Message received loud and clear. And I think the best part of this whole was the bear analogy. That'll surely help me remember.
I did not make that up. That's a well-known me. I did not make that up, but I love it. I use it a lot.
Yeah, I think I must have read it somewhere previously. I do get that, but I didn't resonated with it as much as I did during this recording.
Okay, great.
Thank you so much, Jay Smith, for taking the time out informing us. The lot of information that you told me about, cybercrime and cybersecurity, online privacy. I think this would help my audience, me personally, and we all know now who's the guy if we ever find ourselves in such situations.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much. Take care.
You too.
And this brings us to the end of this really awesome episode of the Most Serious Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it did add some value in your life. We will be back again with another interesting conversation pretty soon.